with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest is somebody whose profession might seem a little bit strange to some of you, because it's a profession that, frankly, we shouldn't really need, but we actually do. So I'm pleased to announce Gina Mundy. She is a childbirth attorney. So Gina, thank you for coming on the show today. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is you do?
Oh, sure. And Erin, thanks for having me. I'm definitely excited for our conversation today. But yeah, I've been a childbirth attorney I'm going on 22 years. My first case was in February 2003. And just so your audience understands what a childbirth case is, these are cases involving the birth of a baby when something goes wrong and baby is not born healthy. Babies may pass away during childbirth. Sometimes moms may pass away during childbirth. And then as the attorney, I come in and I find out what happened, what went wrong. The most important question I always have to, find the answer to is what should have been done. So baby born alive, or baby born healthy, mom around to raise her baby. And those questions have taken me all over the United States many, many times to the different hospital systems, meeting with different delivery teams, the doctors, old residents, nurses, midwives, whoever that might be, just hashing out every aspect of labor and delivery. These cases take a long time to get through the system. So usually when you get one, it's quite a few years of just literally analyzing every aspect of it. About 19 years deep into my career, we had a near family tragic event. Our baby was fine, but my niece was having the first baby of our next generation, and it just did. You know what it did? It was like it just played out like one of my baby cases. Unfortunately, there are they're common issues in these cases. They're reoccurring issues. And whatnot. So that birth, baby's fine today. She's actually, her whole story is the introduction to the book. But, it just stopped me in my tracks. It took me out of my grind. And it just, that human part of me, really came out because, when we went about 20 minutes without knowing if baby was going to be okay. And the families in my cases always describe this time, this transitional period where they have life before baby and they have life after baby, but this period when it all goes down and it's awful. So she was born on a Friday, so I had the weekend to marinate and everything. And I came to the conclusion I have 3 kids. I have 2 daughters. They're now 20, 16, and my little man is 10. And I can tell you how I would prepare my kids for childbirth is completely different than, probably an ordinary family would prepare for childbirth, given what I've seen. Because my kids, it's like, okay, hold on. You have to know this, and this is why. When my niece went into labor, I was 1,100 miles from her that day. I couldn't get to the hospital. So I kept thinking of my kids. I'm like, what if I'm 1,100 miles away, for the birth of my grandkids? So I started writing everything down that I had started to learn from these baby cases, in order to have, healthy grandkids. And once I started writing, it was just a floodgate of information that was coming out of my brain. And I quickly figured that this was information that could not only help my kids have healthy babies, but really families across the world. So
Absolutely.
June 2023, the book was published. And here I am out talking about, basically how to have a healthy baby and, making that decision. Now I'm still a partner in a law firm. I still have my baby cases, but trying to get involved beforehand. So that way, to prevent these mistakes and complications I see.
Right. So tell us real quick the title of the book, please.
A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth. And
Awesome.
then it's, yeah. And you know what? I always have one right here. And I'm like, book, I don't have my book.
So everybody listening, we will put a link down below if you are interested in purchasing Gina's book. My question is, when do you see the beginnings of the interventions gone wrong? Because I presume that in a legal case, that there is some kind of intervention or perhaps non-intervention that occurs in order to then bring it to that place. Certainly, there are things that happen during childbirth that are just very unfortunate facts of life, right? But I presume that the majority of the people that bring these into a legal case are doing so because there was some kind of an intervention or lack of intervention necessary in order to have a healthy outcome. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, 100%. Chapter 11 of my book goes over a little bit of that. Chapter 11 are the common issues and facts in a legal baby case. And the number one most common fact and issue in a baby case is the drug Pitocin. Pitocin is a form of intervention. That is the drug that is used to induce mom's labor by having her uterus contract. And that intervention often leads to a cascade of interventions, and that's when the mistakes and complications typically occur in my cases. Now, everybody has to realize the flip side of that. What I don't see in my cases, this is so important. Natural, vaginal, spontaneous birth, skip the drugs. Skip the interventions. Just try to go natural. If you can pull that up, if you have the ability to pull it up, and I know sometimes Pitocin sounds like such a great option. I had 3 kids, and let me tell you, I never did Pitocin. But if, I know how it is in the last couple of weeks, the last few days, the last hours. I mean, there's just so much running through your head. So if the doctor's like, hey, I can speed this up, or hey, you can have baby tomorrow, we'll just induce, that is a really big decision. And obviously, because, and in my book, I just identify this this may go wrong, or this is a common factor issue. Anything I identify like that, I solve it. Because again, this is initially for my kids. So, okay, you got to know this. But however, chapter 14, that's how to have a safe Pitocin induction. So again, it's, the subtitle of my book is Expecting the Best, how the power of knowledge can help you have a healthy baby. So if parents understand that this drug is associated with complications and mistakes, they need to either read chapter 14, which is this is what you need to do to avoid those. And, again, that since my first case in February 2003, that drug has, it's in almost every case. It's been a big part of my professional career. So, and I've traveled the country. These are different aspects from different hospitals, all put in, here you go. And, or the flip side of that is just go natural, vaginal, spontaneous birth the best you can. But again, people know that, they understand it, then they can make those good decisions. I'll tell you, it's heartbreaking. In these cases, families are literally one decision or minutes from a healthy baby. So making those good choices going into childbirth is very important. And how do you make a good choice? You educate yourself. It's like anything in life. Are you going to make better decisions if you know about something, or if you're going in completely blind? I mean, I don't need to answer that for your audience. I'm sure they're very intelligent. So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think ultimately, I used to work a volunteer for the Birth and Baby Resource Network in my area, and it was all about education. And we often spoke of Pitocin as the beginning, the top of the cascade of intervention. So typically when you see numerous interventions leading up until, cesarean section or whatever that outcome would be, almost always it's because they started with Pitocin. And you go back to that. And I think what a lot of people don't know, we have discussed this on the podcast before with Dr. Fishbein, as well as with Emmy Robin, who's a doula. Yeah.
Emmy's coming on I'm sorry to interrupt Emmy. I just love her so much. She's coming on my podcast on Thursday. I'm just such a huge Emmy fan. But go ahead. Sorry.
Awesome.
Hope you don't lose your train of thought. I forget to say her name. I'm going to light up. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So we've had these discussions about Pitocin being at the top of these cascades of intervention, and people don't often realize that Pitocin is, this synthetic form of oxytocin. It actually creates a much stronger, a much more difficult contraction for baby in particular. Certainly mom then feels the effects of that. And then, we go down the road of epidurals and all of those things because of that Pitocin being introduced early on. So I do think that it's so important for people to understand where those interventions begin. Can you trace things back even during the pregnancy, or is that not something that you typically address in a legal case?
Sometimes, not so much with Pitocin.
Mm-hmm.
Whether maybe they're preeclamptic or something, but sometimes there's like pregnancy issues in cases. Now my book focuses just on childbirth.
Right.
There's actually, so I'm working on more of a pregnancy type book, but just those it's interesting because the ones that occur actually during the birth of a baby, during mom's actual labor, that's kind of this like Pitocin. When you have pregnancy complications, a lot of them are just very individualized depending on what's going on with mom. Because, we're all different. So every pregnancy is different and baby, body, everything. So sometimes those can be more individualized. It's hard. So, it's harder to group like these are the common issues and mistakes during pregnancy.
Right.
There's some, but not, not like childbirth. Childbirth is a glaring Pitocin. And whatnot. But, but even going back to the pregnancy and stuff, I mean, really doctors play a huge role in whether they're going to push for or recommend a Pitocin induction. I've had some recent conversations with doctors that just are mind-blowing and just how different their opinions are. I've had one very highly respected doctor. I respect the doctor, didn't like his opinion or what he told me, but he's a very highly respected doctor in the field, and he has a big, huge patient, or practice. But he told me recently, he's like, the standard of care requires me to offer my patients an elective Pitocin induction at 39 weeks if they're a good candidate. Just so most are, people are good candidates, according to them, not so much me, but anyway.
Right.
So that's one doctor. And I am like, what? No, that's not true. I can tell you that. I'm the one that has to defend you by, no, that is not true. Then another doctor, a couple of weeks later, he was like, yes, we are trying to steer our patients away from elective Pitocin inductions at 39 weeks because of all the complications and the mistakes that, we see. With these. Sometimes we have a Pitocin induction like that too. It's almost like landing on the right side of a close call. My family was very lucky that day. It was March 17th. We landed on the right side of a close call. My cases often are landing on the wrong side, of a close call. So, but with even landing on the right side of a close call, meaning baby and mom walked out, well, one walked out healthy, you know what I mean? Carrying, they were both healthy when they left the hospital. But there's still birth trauma there. It was very traumatic for my niece and, obviously us to, have to go through that, to sit there for 20 minutes and not know if baby's going to live. It's hard. So, again, answering your question, just going into the pregnancy, I mean, and in which direction your childbirth really may take really depends on your doctor. And that's why picking a doctor is very, very, very important.
What about statistically, are you seeing increased issues with things, say, like a scheduled cesarean section, which I know that was very popular for a while? I don't know the prevalence at this time. I had my own baby 17 years ago, so but that was a very, very popular thing to do because it was convenient for the doctors, convenient for the moms to just schedule a cesarean section. Are there Do you see more cases with things like those kinds of interventions?
So elective C-section at 39 weeks is lowest risk to baby. There are they're not childbirth cases involving an elective C-section at 39 weeks.
Okay.
So I write this in my book. Childbirth attorneys, we have a hard time relaxing because of what we see on a day-to-day basis. We're not medical professionals that get to see the good and the bad. We see the bad and then we analyze it for years on end. It's not the easiest job in the world. So for us to relax and have a baby, it might be impossible. So for that reason, even the wives, if it's, I have a guy childbirth attorney, he had his wife an elective C-section at 39 weeks, surrounded by like 6 doctors. I mean, we're just paranoid people with childbirth. So I know I write this, but childbirth attorneys typically do the elective C-sections.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like we take one for the team because but think about it, you have to mentally and physically relax to have a baby. And just, I remember I did try to go vaginal and there was just C-section because I kept looking at the, her heart rate and, and I just didn't like how everything was turning out and this isn't what I expected. And it was just like C-section. And then they wheeled me back and it was C-section. I mean, they didn't put me under general. It was still local. Usually, if they're going to do a stat C-section, baby has to get out right now. They're going to stick to do general, put mom completely out and get baby out as fast as possible. They didn't do anything like that, but it was definitely the rush into the room, just take care of just get the baby out of the attorney, please, But then my next 2 were elective, Pitocin, elective C-sections at 39 weeks. And by the way, if you read this in the book, I did want an elective C-section at 39 weeks. But 20 years ago, that was still borderline, and it did go right after I had, right after 2004, it did go to, positions where, it was acceptable to offer the 39-week C-sections. But when I did it, it was still on the cusp. And so my doctor's like, no, my girlfriend, so back then, if you wanted a C-section, you just had to tell your doctor you had genital herpes. Yeah. I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't think they'll do that now for genital. Well, you can, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, so she's like, Gina, just tell me if genital herpes. And I'm like, ew. I kept saying, I'm not putting it in my medical record. And they're like, so but it was true. I couldn't relax. I was terrified.
Sure.
I got my C-section. So
sure.
Pretty quick.
What I'm guessing I know the answer to this, but maternal and fetal outcomes, who is more impacted in the childbirth process when you go in to litigate a case? Is it primarily moms or babies who are harmed?
Babies.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure what's going on, but lately it seems like it's been the baby's passing. We've had things like that, it's baby, sick, which, there's an injury typically to the brain, permanent, irreversible. But for some odd reason, I've just a lot of babies that have passed. And it's, it sucks. It sucks when I have to open my computer and look at, the baby, and like, the family, because they stole the baby and all that. But I've been, because it's a case, it's in litigation, so pictures are evidence. So, yeah, it's just, it's awful. I don't know. Right. The families, to this day, I don't understand how they recover from something like that. But.
And this is probably a difficult question emotionally, but how with the babies that do you survive, how difficult is it to prove that the injury would not have happened otherwise, whether it's some kind of hypoxia or injury from forceps or something like that. How difficult is it to prove that the injury could have been prevented? I assume that that's what you would need to prove in order to win a case, but maybe I'm off base here, but I'd love to hear what that looks like.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I get those questions, and sometimes, it's just those are harder to answer because every case is so individualized. It's when did the Pitocin go up too much, or when did it start? Was there, I have cases where one's a 3-day induction, and then another one, the mom was in the hospital for 4 hours, and then she was, came in, she was going to be induced, and then she, the baby just immediately didn't like the Pitocin. So it's really, that is just a really hard question because it does depend on each individual patient and whatnot. When we're trying to figure out, is the doctor or the delivery team responsible for, the injury, what the first standard in a legal case that they look at, it's called the standard of care. And it's what a reasonable and prudent doctor would do under same or similar circumstances. Meaning looking at the big picture, were their actions reasonable or not? Again, it's looking at each individual patient with each individual clinical picture and what's going on with that particular patient. And that's how they determine whether there's liability or not. So, so it's really, that can be like a harder, question to answer because it's just, but it's, when I say reoccurring issue, reoccurring facts. So we have to, are they liable? Are they not? And I'll tell you, another interesting thing too, is that doctors are all over the board in these cases on whether a doctor did something wrong or not. When a case comes in, one of the first things that each side of the case has to do is retain medical experts. So I will retain 2 doctors who are OBGYNs who deliver babies, and I will send them the medical records of mom and baby, and I will ask them, can you tell me whether this was good care or bad care? Did this care cause the baby's injury, or, is this just, like you said earlier, a fact of life? And the 2 doctors will literally, the first doctor will tell me everything was done wrong. Their care caused the baby's injury. The next doctor will look at that same exact medical record course in the hospital and say, everything was done correctly. This just happens in life. And, I've had them literally from the same hospitals, give me very different opinions. So again, when you're establishing a case and whatnot, you may, again, one doctor is like, hey, this is, this happens. And another doctor may be like, yeah, this shouldn't have happened. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said, because one of my questions would have been, okay, well, is it hospital standard of care? For example, do the same doctors within that hospital adhere to certain protocols that then cause them to react in a certain way? Or is it, does it vary across, various doctors, even within, I would assume they would still be on the same floor in the same hospital, right? So that's very interesting that sometimes these doctors in the same hospitals are treating things very differently. I know over the last few years in particular, it has become widely acknowledged that it can be very important to have an advocate for a patient when they are in the hospital. And even though giving birth is a normal human process, they're still considered a patient during that time. So I'm sure, as you've already sung Emmy's praises, that you do advocate for doulas or somebody to advocate for a mother in labor. What does that look like in the best possible scenario?
Well, in the best scenario, so like you said, there's really kind of a couple advocates. I'm a huge fan of doulas. Doulas are not in childbirth cases. And that is because I do believe they help families to avoid the complications and mistakes that I see. And just so your audience understands, with a doula, if she even talked to a mom during her pregnancy, stepped foot for 1 minute into the labor room or anything, she would immediately be a fact witness in the case. And again, I repeat, there's no doulas in my cases, so that's very important. And but then if you're like, no, I don't want to hire a doula, I just want to keep it more intimate or whatever, it's important to have like a second set of eyes on mom and baby. Mom is ultimately the decision maker, and the delivery team are more of the medical advisors. So mom has just such an important job of trying to, again, physically, mentally deliver baby, make these good decisions. And, that can be rough. So if grandmas make great advocates just because we've been through this. Grandmas love my book, and think about it. I wrote it to have a healthy grandkids. So I kind of wrote it like, I guess not for grandmas, but, they do appreciate it. But having an advocate in a room is incredibly important, because I'll tell you, another thing, we haven't talked about this yet, but back to chapter 11, the second most common fact and issue in a baby case, a busy labor and delivery unit, because babies want to come when babies want to come. So having that second set of eyes on mom and having dad or having grandma get ready and know what to look for, know how to communicate for the delivery team, know how to, kind of protect mom and baby can really make such a big difference. So in my book, again, I don't say just get an advocate, have a nice day. There's a whole chapter on my book on what a good baby advocate needs to know in order, again, to protect mom and baby. But yeah, I definitely think that one of the ways to solve the, this issue of, preventing, or I should say, one of the ways to prevent the mistakes and complications is definitely to have somebody who has some knowledge of childbirth in the room, helping mom, watching mom. If the delivery team they're busy, because you may have like a really good delivery team, but the unit is packed. So for instance, I feel like a lot of the cases, mom somehow gets kind of pushed into the extra room. So extra rooms, they always scare me because I'm like, oh no, not the extra room again. Because it's kind of like, they're just, mom's not being checked on enough. So if something's going on and a baby advocate can recognize that, they can step in and get the delivery team. It's more working with the delivery team and communicating with them and whatnot. But yeah, baby advocate, dads, grandmas, friends, aunts, whoever definitely can, if they're, prepared accordingly, they can definitely make a huge difference, during the birthing process for mom and baby. And that's why, I included the whole chapter in my book about it.
How many of your cases do you note that parents go into it having childbirth education of some kind?
None. That is one of the lessons from the baby cases. So just real quick, the chapter one are all of the lessons from the baby cases. This is what we can learn from the past to prevent it from happening in the future. Each lesson is a subsequent chapter. Lesson number 1 is you must get ready for childbirth. Whether it's my book, whether it's a podcast, research, childbirth education, you have to have an understanding of what you're walking into, because you cannot walk in and then maybe something's going on and your doctor's trying to explain things to you. You go deer in the headlights, and I'll tell you that element of surprise can take your focus away. And I just do not recommend it on one of the biggest days of your life. So getting ready definitely will help you just have it just more smooth. It's expectations too. If you know what to expect, if you understand, again, what you're walking into, it's going to be better for you and baby. But again, like I say, okay, chapter 1, you got to prepare. So chapter 2, I call chapter 2, the foundation of labor and delivery. These are all the things about labor and delivery that I find important as a childbirth attorney. So if I get a new case in and I'm like, is this good care or bad care? The things in chapter 2, those are the things that are in my head that I kind of rely on to formulate my own opinions, as the attorney on the cases, on the baby cases. So when I wrote that chapter, the intention was to give families kind of this foundation to help them make those good decisions. When I do sit down with families and we go over, the day their baby was born, in the aftermath of something going wrong, they know so much more. And I know that if they would have known this from the beginning, that maybe they would not be sitting, down with someone like me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I think many people plan for the baby, right? We have baby showers. We have, you shop for the cute clothes and the stroller and the perfect car seat, and you spend all of your time doing that. But very few, mothers, I find, really dive deep into educating themselves on the actual childbirth process. So I think that's hugely important, understanding that, while preparing for baby is great, it's fantastic, but you also need to prepare for childbirth and understand what the potential complications are, what the potential mistakes that the hospital might make are. And then, so my other question to you, I mentioned that, my own birthing, childbirthing process took place a little over 17 years ago. And at that point in time, I've shared on the podcast before that I had my son at home with a home birthing midwife. So I'm curious how many of your cases occur inside the hospital versus, say, outside the hospital or in a birthing center kind of a facility.
So my cases are hospital-based.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's, sometimes when there's home births and whatnot, even if this is, kind of, I don't know, I don't want to seem like too odd. Hold on, I'll raise my hand again. So with home birth cases, there's not that many, but it also, sometimes they have like a midwife who's not insured or something like that, and there's just no money for the family to get if something goes wrong. Whereas a hospital and doctors and delivery teams are, the deeper pocket. So typically, childbirth cases that I see, know of, and whatnot, they're typically hospital-based.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then one other question that came up while you were speaking earlier is, what do you see as far as, is it more too many interventions, or is it neglect that cause the outcomes that we're looking at?
Like the trickiest question ever. So it's the cascade of interventions following Pitocin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you have almost like too many interventions, but then that's when things get kind of dicey and, baby can get into trouble really, really fast. And when that happens, it's not baby gets into trouble C-section. It's like baby might get into trouble. They typically have this middle ground time where they're trying to do interventions or whatnot, then C-section. Basically, again, like I said, tricky question. So you have Pitocin, and that's your cascade of interventions. And then what happens is oftentimes, there's just so many interventions, there's so much going on that baby, eventually gets into trouble, but then maybe it's another intervention that's not offered, or they don't intervene in time, or something of that nature. So it's really like a mix of both. And it's a very tricky scenario, but anytime you're throwing Pitocin into the mix, it just complicates everything, because Pitocin, these are artificial contractions. So baby is in mom's uterus, hanging out with the umbilical cord, the placenta, maybe surrounded by fluid still. And, then there's these artificial contractions. And, people have to understand that when mom's contracting, contractions not only suck for mom, they suck for baby. Mom's lucky. Mom can get, because I'll tell you, with Pitocin, those are some really intense contractions. I don't know about you, I've met one person who has actually made it through Pitocin induction without an epidural. So in the cases, actually the moms tried. They'll be like, no, I don't want the epidural. I'm just going to have some Pitocin. And they even end up, with an epidural.
Mm-hmm.
So but with the contractions, everybody has to understand, uterus is contracting down on baby. It's almost like a little bit like a pushing baby out or something. When the uterus contracts down on baby, that stops oxygen to baby because the umbilical cord is like the lifeline, the placenta is getting the nutrients, but it's squeezing down and it's just cutting that oxygen off temporarily to baby. Now, nobody freak out that it's completely normal in a spontaneous vaginal birth, no Pitocin. However, when you have a situation where they're trying to administer Pitocin, they're trying to mimic spontaneous labor, but then you have all these other interventions going on. It's really hard to do. And sometimes it's like they have all these interventions going, but then baby gets into trouble. Maybe their mom's contracting too much because I had a doctor explain it and there's a contraction. It's almost like baby's like going underwater, and that's fine. Again, natural spontaneous birth, they're able to handle that, but they can go downhill pretty quick in a situation where mom's having too many contractions because the Pitocin is too much.
Mm-hmm.
But then the doctors and everybody has to realize this and offer mom an intervention. And sometimes in these Pitocin inductions, it happens so fast. It's like they it's kind of missed. So there will be like not offering mom, an intervention or coming in and saying, hey, we need to do this or we need to do that in time. And then all of a sudden, the baby will crash.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know it's a very tricky question. The whole intervention versus, not intervening in time or not offering something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I can't stress enough, even when I was, assisting my local birth educators in talking about Pitocin. And I think most moms in particular have zero idea of any of the complications of Pitocin and the fact that it does really start this whole sequence of intervention. So I think that's a hugely important point. Absolutely.
I love that you were assisting with the educating and all of that. That's great.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I got into it actually at the request of my midwife because apparently I was an excellent student because I wanted to know everything there was about childbirth before I had my baby. So I was on the fast track.
You're very knowledgeable. I'm like, I can't figure out if you read my book. She just knows this stuff. I'm like, but a lot of times, I don't get, somebody's just kind of on their show and they're just, hey, what information can moms know to have a healthy baby? But, I can tell you're very like educated on this because I'm like, the whole dialogue we're having, but I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was, it's been a long time since I've really had a lot of discussions on childbirth, but hugely important. Lots of our listeners definitely are in that phase of life. And so I want to make sure that we get all this information out to them. So that being said, obviously, we've talked about having an advocate. We've talked about the dangers of Pitocin. Anything else that moms should really know going into the childbirth process?
Oh, that's a really loaded question for me. But, there are just a couple more important things. So real quick, chapter 11, the third most kind of common fact in a baby case is that when there's a mistake or a complication and something goes wrong, it is typically after mom's water breaks. Breaking your bag of water is a very important decision. I know that it's kind of like Pitocin sometimes with doctors. They're like, hey, this could speed up your labor and you're going to have babies sooner and whatnot. And I get it. That sounds very appealing. But it's very important if your delivery team, says, hey, I recommend, remember, everything's a recommendation from the delivery team. Mom's the decision maker. I recommend breaking your bag of water. Really, you need to find out, is this for a medical reason or do you want to be home for dinner? And, and unfortunately in the cases, I've heard both. But again, when, mom, babies hanging out in the uterus with the umbilical cord, placenta surrounded by the fluid, it's been this way for a long time. Once that fluid drains out, that changes the environment inside the uterus. How does it change the environment inside the uterus? Nobody knows. We can't see baby. We can't see inside mom's uterus. But sometimes it can make baby more vulnerable to injury. So that's something I really do like to mention on podcasts. I also keep in mind, in my cases, it is the delivery team's care that is at issue, analyzed more than any other aspect of the case. So it's very important to have an understanding of who is going to be on your delivery team when you come into the hospital. There's different things that you really need to know about them. Your doctor will head your delivery team. Have an understanding. Does your doctor come to the hospital? Just so everybody knows, most doctors are not at the hospital when you're in labor. The person who is in charge, who heads your delivery team, isn't even there. So they have to rely on the people that are bedside. And that's typically your labor and delivery nurse is very, very important during your labor, because she's really the one assessing. And sometimes she's the one who's responsible for communicating, to your doctor, who then gives recommendations. Do you have residents? Residents are doctors in training. They're practicing on, basically they're sitting in school forever, and then they go into residency, and now they're delivering babies and managing mom. And I'll tell you, at the hospitals, at teaching institutions, they do a lot. And sometimes I'll tell you, in some baby cases, it's miscommunication between the resident and the doctor that is at issue. So again, finding out who's on your delivery team, I do recommend having a birth plan, labor and delivery plan. And listen, I have a different spin on it. It's not so much the plan itself. You have to walk into childbirth understanding that is a very hard thing to plan, which is why you almost need a plan, if that makes any sense, because it is hard to plan. But for me, as a childbirth attorney, it's more of the act of preparing the plan. It's gathering all your information. It's marinating in the different decisions that you may have to make depending on how your labor goes. And that act of preparing the plan, it just helps you, process and learn about labor and delivery. So then when, you go for the big day, you're kind of ready. It's almost like, and then even in my book, I'm like, well, you can give your plan to your delivery team. I do recommend that because they will, they'll know you're prepared. They'll have, and they'll know your wishes, what kind of, what you're thinking and whatnot. But listen, if you don't want to give it to your delivery team, that's fine too. The act, again, of preparing it will prepare you for childbirth and help you get ready to make those good decisions. Last thing, please learn the baby's heart rate. I'm telling you, this is not rocket science at all. Medical community wants to keep it to themselves. I disagree. When I first got my job as an attorney, the first thing they did was put the baby's heart rate on my desk and say, learn how to read this. I can look at a baby's heart rate during labor and I can tell you if baby is a rock star or if baby is struggling. Why wouldn't parents want to know this? And I can tell you, when there's decisions during labor that need to be made, a lot of times it stems from the baby's heart rate. So that, and think about it, kind of like we talked about a minute ago. I mean, baby's inside mom. When mom's in labor, there's two patients, mom, baby. Mom is easy. Doctor, delivery team can look at mom. They can assess mom, ask mom questions. Mom talks. Where's the pain? They make a diagnosis and a plan. babies are just so much different. So the way they know whether a baby is tolerating labor or not, or something very important like a Pitocin induction, is their heart rate. Their heart rate has certain characteristics where if baby's doing great, you can literally tell by looking at the fetal monitor. So I do a whole, I have a whole chapter on how to read a baby's heart rate and why it's important. Now, you don't need to know the ins and outs of everything, but just having a general understanding of that, I mean, that's so important. So those are probably some of, there's more chapters. But, again, I talk about having the advocate and stuff like that. But I'll tell you, moms, dads, grandmas, friends, aunts, whoever, if you are going to go into or be part of someone's labor, please read my book. My book was meant to help not only mom, but everybody around mom to, protect and mom and baby, make sure at the end of the day, they come home safely and just avoid the mistakes and complications that I see.
Absolutely. So Gina, for those who are listening who would like a copy of that book, where can they find it?
So the best place right now is Amazon. But I'll tell you, and you can put in A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth, Gina Mundy, boom, boom, pops right up. But my website will always have different information. I do have a childbirth podcast. So that's on there. And again, the goal of that podcast is to help parents have a healthy baby. And so, that's why Emmy's coming on. Emmy and I are going to hash out, okay, I think she's probably going to be probably more home birth and be like, hey, okay, what do they know for home birth? And because she has, you had her on, she's amazing. So that information, and then just anything else that might be going on, I have a blog and stuff like that. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Chapter 1 of my book and the introduction to my book are both on my website for free. Again, chapter 1 being all of the lessons from the childbirth cases that I know if families at least have that information, it's going to point them in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. So everybody, run, don't walk. And if you're having a baby or planning to have a baby sometime in the future, please check out Gina Mundy's book. All right, Gina, we have reached the end of the podcast. I ask every single one of our guests these 8 questions. They're rapid fire questions designed to give us a little bit more insight into who you are and what makes you tick. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. The first is, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. It would be my hemp CBD balm that I put on the back of my knees. I'm a huge runner, but I'm also 48. So they're like, Gina, you have arthritis. And I'm telling you, if it's on my knee, I'm fine. And I can run like a rock star. So that, I can't live without that.
Awesome. Tell us something most people don't know about you.
I have gone vegan to improve my athletic performance.
Very cool. If I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what would you suggest be added?
Oh, Nico Moon, Paradise to Me, and Good Time.
I like that song. All right. All right. What's your favorite guilty pleasure?
Wine.
Yeah, and you're not the first one to say alcohol. I think the other
which is why I have to run so much.
I think the other response was tequila, though. But all right. What is the most influential book you've ever read?
Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's a book on negotiation.
Nice. What does the word revolution mean to you?
Oh, revolution. For some reason, I feel like this isn't the right term, but like fighting for like a safer childbirth, to get this information out there. I don't know if you know the stats on our healthcare system, but they're really bad for moms and babies. And I do not believe the answer with having more healthy babies and more moms around to raise their babies is the answer is not with the hospitals, it's with the families. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm here, fighting again. So getting this information out. See this, I'm like, I don't know if fighting's the right word, but I don't know why that popped in my head. Like revolution, fight, I don't know. So it's more of just getting this information, out to help families, have a healthy baby.
Absolutely. What does the word remedy mean to you?
problem solving in order to make things better.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
Oh, take some time for yourself. I wish I would have done that as a mom. I've always been last, and then, well, last couple of years I've been a little bit more selfish. But just you don't be last. Take your time. You're healthier. You can be more productive. So I have a whole regimen now where it's kind of like, okay, I'm doing stuff for myself. And again, my kids are older, like I said, 20, 16, and whatnot. So it's a little bit easier for me to take that time, but it makes me able to think better, more clear. It just makes me happier. It's good all around.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Gina Mundy, for being my guest today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you all next time. Just so you know, I will be doing some interviews in Oklahoma, so those will be coming out shortly for those of you who are interested in hearing more about the Hee-Haw for Health. All right, guys, actually, by the time this publishes, the event will have already happened, but you'll be able to watch all of the interviews from that event on the podcast next week. All right, guys, take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
With hope as a guiding